It is impossible to deny God. Let me show you why. Have you ever noticed that the moment someone denies God, they still want to talk about truth, logic, morality, meaning, consciousness, and reason, as if those things can survive after God is removed? But here's the reality. Atheism doesn't just deny God, it destroys the very tools it needs to deny Him. Because without God, you cannot explain yourself, your mind, or the truths your mind knows. Today, I want to show you slowly and clearly why atheism cannot stand and why the Christian worldview is the only foundation strong enough to carry the weight of reality itself. Let's begin with something that no one can deny. You are conscious. You are not a machine or a bundle of chemicals reacting blindly. You have something called an inner life. You think, you feel, you reason, you choose between options, and you experience the world from the inside. Scientists can describe your brain, but they cannot explain why there is a you inside your body. This is called what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Why physical processes are accompanied by a living, unified, first person self. Even many atheists admit that this is a problem. St. Augustine said long ago that the mind is not corporeal, meaning it is not physical that we can touch. And scripture tells us why. God breathed into Adam the breath of life, and he became a living soul. Your consciousness is not just atoms, it is spiritual. If atheism is true, consciousness should not exist, but it does, and therefore atheism fails at the very first step. But however, here is the second step, and it's even more devastating for the atheist worldview. When you think, you don't only feel emotions, you grasp universals, truths that are independent of our minds. They are objective, unchanging, eternal, immaterial, and the same for every mind. These are things like mathematics, logic, moral truths, and concepts like justice, love, and goodness. A neuron cannot contain the concept of justice. A brain chemical cannot contain the truth that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. And atoms do not follow logic. Yet you know these things. St. Augustine asked the famous question, if you and I both know that something is true, where do we see that truth? Not in you and not in me, but in the unchanging truth above our minds. Meaning, every time you use logic or morality or mathematics, you are touching something eternal, something greater than yourself, something beyond you. But where do these truths live? This is where Christianity shines with unmatched clarity. For 2,000 years, the church has taught what scripture reveals. Truth exists because God exists. God, remember, is the great I am. Universal truths are not floating in space. They are grounded in the eternal mind of God. Thomas Aquinas said, whatever we find in creatures in many forms is found in God in one simple and unified way. Meaning, logic, morality, mathematics, beauty, and meaning. These all exist eternally in God, and we know them because our minds are made in His image. Scripture affirms this. Acts 17 verse 22 says, in Him we live and move and have our being. Colossians 2 verse 3, in Him are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. And John 1 verse 1 to 3 describes Jesus as the Logos, understood by the Greeks to be the rational ordering principle of reality. You know logic because God is logical. You know justice because God is just. And you know truth because God is true. Remove God and you remove the foundation of all intelligibility. Now, let's connect the pieces. You have consciousness, an immaterial self, universals, but universals require an eternal mind. But atheism denies an eternal mind. What happens if the atheist worldview is true? You lose consciousness, logic, mathematics, moral truths. You can see how this is a problem. Meaning, identity, reason, even truth itself. The entire inner world collapses. And this is what some philosophers call the impossibility of the contrary. That denying God makes everything, including the act of denial, impossible. Atheism tells you to stand on the ground of reason and then cuts the ground from beneath your feet. Let's deal with a few quick objections. Objection 1. Abstract Platonism says universals don't need a mind, they just exist. If universals exist apart from minds, then how do you know them? Blind, impersonal abstractions cannot cause you to know anything. Christianity provides the missing link. Universals exist in the mind of God, and God created our minds to reflect His. A second objection. Consciousness comes from complexity. Here's a reply. Complexity creates ability, not inner experience. A more complicated machine is still a machine. No amount of atoms becomes a soul with personal experience. And objection 3. Evolution explains reason. Here's a reply. Evolution explains survival behaviors, not truth. Natural selection doesn't care if your beliefs are true, only if they help you survive. Yet eternal truths that often don't help you survive. That points beyond evolution to an eternal mind. Most arguments for God try to prove He is probable, but this argument shows something much, much deeper. God is necessary because without God, consciousness is impossible. Without God, reason is impossible. Without God, universals are impossible. And without God, truth itself is impossible. Every act of reasoning is an argument for God. Every moment of consciousness is a witness to God. Every moral judgment points to the morality of God. Every logical thought testifies to the mind of God. God is not just the best explanation. He is the only possible foundation for everything you experience. And here is the whole argument in one breath. I am conscious, an immaterial self. I know with my consciousness, I know universal truths, logic, morality, mathematics, etc. Universals cannot come from matter or finite minds. Therefore, they require an eternal, immaterial mind. And that mind is God, Jesus Christ, the Logos. Denying God destroys the very tools used to deny Him. Atheism cannot explain the world because it cannot even explain the person making the argument. But Christianity explains the self, the mind, truth, morality, meaning, and consciousness, because all these come from the God who made us in His image. Therefore, the whole of creation arises as a single testimony to the Logos. For in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. All things came into being through Him, and without Him not one single thing exists that was not shaped by His eternal wisdom and power. And the same Logos, the eternal truth through whom the universe holds together, became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld His glory, the glory of the only begotten Son from the Father, full of grace, full of truth, full of the light that makes all things intelligible. And to all who receive Him, to all believe in His name, He gives the authority to become children of God. Children not born of blood, nor of human striving, nor of the will of the flesh, but born of God Himself. For indeed, the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth, the very things that make reality coherent and the human soul alive, have come to us through Jesus Christ, the eternal Logos, in whom we live and move and have our being. God bless.